I'm Dr. David Croto, and I am here with Dr. Markus Klausli to talk about suffering, specifically suffering in 1 Peter. So let me ask you, Dr. Klausli, why is this an important topic for you?
A couple of reasons. One is that the Bible actually talks a fair amount about suffering, but often that gets neglected in our preaching, especially the way the Bible, especially specifics, the way the Bible talks about it. And then when it is addressed, it usually is only in terms of my own personal suffering or difficulties that I face, and it leaves out, I would say, other important aspects.
Well, does the Bible teach us how to deal with personal suffering?
Absolutely, and there's lots and lots of places where that happens. We see it in the Old Testament narratives, and especially in the Old Testament books of Job and Ecclesiastes and also the Psalms. So there's lots about that.
Okay. Well, what's Peter's perspective on suffering?
Well, Peter's focus is specifically suffering in context of Christian persecution. So that's what gives him his unique take.
So how does he develop that theme in his letter in 1 Peter?
Yeah, well, first he starts by showing us Jesus Christ as the example of suffering. In 1 Peter, we not only learn that Jesus suffered for our sins, but we learn how he endured those sufferings. For example, Peter quotes Isaiah 53 that talks about the suffering servant and emphasizes that when Jesus suffered, he suffered innocently. Like he wasn't suffering because he did something wrong. He was suffering because he was obeying God's will. And then it tells us that when he was undergoing tremendous stress and suffering, he never retaliated. He didn't fight back. Instead, he entrusted himself to God. So from Peter, we get just a different. We get to learn about suffering from the person of Jesus.
Okay, so after he talks about Christ's suffering, where does he go from there?
Well, Peter, right in the center of his epistle, he actually states in so many words that Christ suffered for us to give us an example so that we would just follow in his footsteps. So Peter expects us to look at Christ, not only benefit from his sufferings, but how he suffered and then do what he did.
So what belongs to this example?
Well, like Christ, Christians should only suffer because they are obeying God's will and not because they're doing anything wrong. So if persecution comes on a Christian, it shouldn't be because they're being belligerent or difficult, but it should be because they're obeying God. And one special focus of Peter is what this looks like in a social context. So in other words, not just in my private life, but how I live in society.
Okay, so we can bring suffering upon ourselves because we're living an ungodly life or because we're belligerent or something. But that's not what Peter is talking about. It's suffering because you're living a righteous life. So is there anything else you want to say about that?
Just a couple more things. First of all, we should have the mindset to be ready to suffer. In other words, we should live in a way for God and be willing to take the consequences if that goes against the grain of this world. So having a mindset like Christ did to bear suffering, and then second of all, to make the most of it. If we are persecuted, to use that as an opportunity to witness for Christ.
Okay, that sounds kind of difficult. Does Peter give us any idea on how Christians can live in this way?
Yeah, Peter motivates his readers. He motivates us to think, to give us a big perspective of what's going on when we encounter persecution. First of all, he reminds us that when we suffer for our faith, it's kind of a refining process. It sanctifies us. It makes us, it shows the genuine nature of our faith, right? If we're willing to stand up for Christ, it shows that, wow, our faith is genuine. So he motivates us in that way. And secondly, he says, when we are persecuted, it's as though we're sharing Christ's sufferings. And Peter will go on from there and say, well, if we're sharing in his sufferings, we can look forward to sharing with him in his glory. So it's that there's a motivation piece as well. It's not just you're kind of on your own and hope things go well.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, so how should this impact our lives as Christians?
I think, first of all, we should determine that we should never act in a way that provokes persecution, right? We're not out there to try to get persecuted. That's the wrong idea of what he's saying there. On the other hand, as one commentator put it, it could be sometimes we never get any pushback because we live in a way that just tries to please everybody around us. We never really stand for Christ or for for the gospel because we're afraid of persecution. And maybe we need to think about Peter's encouragement to live for Christ regardless of the consequences, rather than trying to mitigate anything that might happen.
This has been very insightful on a topic that is increasing in importance for Christians around the world, but even in America today. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.